Hello, welcome back, and as you can see I've made a start on the Australian truck, and why they only call it an Australian truck I don't know. It's actually a Western Star, and they came after the white trucks. I'm sure you've heard of them. They weren't very popular in Australia, but they were there, and basically it was the same thing. They were white were bought out by this company and they called them Western Star. There you go. There's very little information about this truck on the kit. It tells you that Australian trucks are built for the outback and road trains and all the rest of it. The reality is there are a hell of a lot of trucks in Australia that only work in one state, work around one trailer. The vehicles I drove were for a timber imports company and various other companies were only registered for one trailer, so there you go. So this one is I'm only going to be building the unit, the unit, the six-wheeler unit. It's a 6x4. That's a chassis. Quite basic. There's not a huge amount of detail on this. It starts off by telling you to drill loads of holes in the chassis. It says here to drill 3 on that side there, but I can't work out where to drill the third one. That's at, where's my pen? At this point here. But I can't work out for the life of me where you drill the third one, so I'll have to wait until I get down to put the part on. This is the part that goes in, and I suspect it's a steering box, and I suspect it goes there into that hole there. But there you go. I could well be wrong. Like when I get to it, I'll tell you about all these parts. They're very hard to put in. They don't really fit, but I think it go in there. Because it's all black, it's hard to see where you're up to with it, and it's hard to be very precise. And as you can see with the video, it's also hard to see it on the video. But anyway, so it tells you to drill a load of holes. So I've drilled them where I think they should go. It then tells you to put these parts back together. The A after the postfix on it is a sprue letter. So it tells you to put all those parts in and join the chassis together. With these two parts here, 6A and 5A, the best way to do it is to fix the top one in, which is 6A, and then when that's set, then put the bottom one in, which is 5A. Otherwise you'll never get that angle right. It's extremely hard to see on this video, isn't it? I'm sure you get the idea. So that's sheet number 1. There's not a huge amount to this. Sheet number 2. The instructions come as a big fold out sheet. I didn't like that, so I've cut it all up, and I don't know if I've helped myself or not. Anyway, on to section number 2. It tells you to put the springs on, really simple stuff, and to melt the ends of the steering. So this is the axle that's being built up there. Where's it gone? That's the axle that's being built up there, and melting the ends. A really easy cigarette lighter on a piece of metal. I use this thing here and just warm the end of it and then touch it to the pieces of plastic, and that melts them over right well. Don't press it on for any length of time, because if you do, you'll weld it in anyway. You might as well have glued it. So that all moves around. This piece here, can you see that? Yeah, of course you can. This piece here, after going through a rod, goes back to the steering box, and that will give me the position to put that steering box on the chassis. So that's that. That's the front axle done. Then it's got the suspension units for the 2 rear axles. Again, goes together really quite easy, and you can see there's nothing difficult about that at all. What I would say with this is that there are seam lines. Let's see if I can get a bit closer. Yeah, it's almost still in focus. You can see on here I've had to scrape the seam lines off, and that's on all the pieces. You can see on that tank there, that air tank, that I've had to scrape the seam lines off that as well. I've just noticed there, oh no, that piece is meant to be in there. It looks more like a piece of sprue. I've just noticed it now. It looks more like a piece of sprue. It must be meant to be in there because it's got a bolt on each end. So I guess that's meant to be there. This is a movable fifth wheel, and you will move it around very often, especially in this country, in the UK. You find that you get a 6-wheeler unit like this, and then somebody will ask you to take a city trailer, a 20-foot trailer, to a supermarket somewhere, and you can't have the fifth wheel. If it's a fixed fifth wheel, then the trailer legs will hit the back of your back of your unit, and you knock the trailer legs off and smash your lights out. So the fifth wheel moves back and forth. It's also there for the weight distribution. So if you've got something that's really quite heavy, it's better to bring it forward and use all 3 of the axles than have it on the back and lifting the front, the steer off the road, which is what generally happens. So that's a movable fifth wheel. If ever you use one, be careful. In the UK and in Europe, if you move it back and couple a long trailer onto it, you could be over length and get nicked if you get pulled. So that's what that's for. And they put all the spring-loaded gubbins in it, but not put a handle on it. There's normally a handle so you can move this part of it up and down. The fifth wheel sits on those 2 lugs. There's normally a handle so you can move it back and forth. There you go. You can't move it by moving it yourself. You have to unclip it, drive the tractor forward or backwards, then clip it back in again, same as you would if you were coupling a trailer onto it. And fuel tank hangers. The fuel tanks are chrome. I'll get to those eventually. Don't do what I did when I was cutting the chassis members off the sprue. I cut one of these off as well. It's the mounting for the cab, so I had to glue that back down. It's very hard to see, isn't it? What else is there? Not a lot that I can tell you there. Yeah, again, you can see where I had to take the seam lines off those 2 air tanks, where it's a bit matte as against the gloss, and on the front springs as well. Same thing, exactly the same thing, and it's on all of it, all the way through the kit. Once that's done, then it moves on. Once you've got the back spring suspension on, the airbags and the springs, then you move on to section 3, which is putting it all together again, but it builds up the 2 axles as well. And I don't know why, but some of it's got quite a lot of detail on it, and other bits simply don't. So on a rear axle, I'm sure that you're all aware, you've got to put oil in that diff, but there's nowhere to put it, and you've also got to be able to drain oil out of that diff, and there's nowhere to do that either. So I'll put the drain and the filler cap in there, and that goes on both axles. It will be more obvious on this rear axle that it's missing, but we'll put them in anyway. For some reason, and I don't see the why on that one, there are 2 small air chambers on the mid axle, sorry, and 2 really quite big ones on the rear axle. Don't know why that is. And as I say, there's very little information on the box. If you go scrabbling around and looking for stuff on the internet, I've worked it out that it's either a 1980 or a 1984 Western Star, and that's about all the information I can get, and that's simply by looking at the parts on it. I've not put the prop shafts together yet because all this has got to be painted. That then goes on to section 4, which is putting the engine together. Again, it's reasonably detailed, and the turbo there, as you can see, and I put the pincer joint. The turbo comes in 2 halves, and it's dreadfully difficult to see that, isn't it? The turbo comes in 2 halves, and they have to be glued together, fastened together and glued, and then the air intake has to marry up with that crossover that goes into the air manifold on this side, the air intake manifold on this side. However, The pins that locate them, it's got a half round pin that puts them together, and if you do that, this the air intake ends up on this side and upside down. So there's an obvious problem there. What I've done is I've cut the pin off, then glued it together in the right situation. When you glue it together, you'll find that this pin on the crossover manifold there, crossover pipe, is too long, and you need to cut some off it. About a millimetre and a half I had to cut off it. The rest of it goes on easily. Oil cooler on the back of the gearbox, filters, fuel filter, oil filter, the air intake manifold, no, that's not a starter motor, I think that's, I don't know what that is. Yeah, it is, it's a starter motor, must be a starter motor. There's a gearbox behind it. So starter motor, no wires going to anything. All these pulleys and pulley wheels at the front, I don't know if you're going to be able to see them on here. Oh, wow, yeah, look at that. Yeah, you can see them. All those pulleys and pulley wheels there, they fit where they touch. So you've got to glue them one at a time, glue one end at a time, and then when it's almost set, line it up with the next point and just and tack glue it then, and glue them all together. And it took me about an hour and a half to get all those in, so that they were straight and they looked as though they're real. So that's the pulleys. So all of that, I mean, it's fairly straightforward that they go on, and then they plonk onto the front of the engine. There's a couple of little bits. The pipe off this manifold 76B runs down and runs onto the pipe off the pulley here, and it's not quite long enough. I don't know if you can see that. So I had to put a little piece of filler in the middle of that, just to fill it up. It doesn't show up now while it's black, but can you see it? Yeah. When it's painted, this is all going to be bright red, and when it's painted, it would show up a mile away. The other thing that I had to do is the alternator there. It was just sitting there in limbo, and it was just the pulley belt that was holding it up. Can we see the pulley belt? Can we heck? But anyway, it was the pulley that was holding it up. So, right, okay, we've got it. Let's see if I angle this light down a bit more. Right, so that pulley there was holding the alternator up, which of course it should be 2 bolts into the side of the engine and an adjustment bracket at the back there. So I put an adjustment bracket on that I've made out a little piece of PVC, so that goes on the back there. That's about it for the engine. There's not a lot to say with it. I'm going to wire it up where it's obvious. Wires coming out the back of the alternator, wires coming out the back of the starter motor, and wire it to where it can be seen. You know, if it can't be seen, I'm not doing it. Simple as that. I'm not going to put it in yet. Oddly, the engine is held in place by fastening it to the radiator fan like that. Then it goes in, and it'll sit there then like that. But if you take the radiator off, it just falls out through the bottom. So it's not, I wouldn't be putting it in anyway. So that's those bits. Things that I've got to make before I paint it. On the back here, in America, for some reason, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's different. In America, I'm trying to find it, yeah. In America, on a unit, they just have 2 lights in the centre. So this kit says to paint them both red. I'm sure one of them would be an indicator light. The top of it would be an indicator light. But that wouldn't be acceptable in the UK, Australia or Europe for that matter. So what we have is a lighting bar, and what these had across the back was a lighting bar right across there. Can you see that? Yeah. So right across the back there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a lighting bar that goes on top of the mudguards to go right the way across. And it would also, if it was a road train, it wouldn't be flattened off like that. It would have a towing hitch, which is a cup cup like that and a big old steel pin that goes through it, and that would be to tow the dolly if it was being used as a road train, because it's got to have a dolly to put the trailers together. Sometimes you'd see them with 2 dollies on. You don't see it, they're not as common now, because I believe that I don't live there anymore. I haven't done for 40 years, but they use the double Bs now, where the one trailer is same length, but the cargo area is a bit shorter, and it's got a 5th wheel at the back of it, so you can couple another trailer on. A lot easier, but this wasn't. This would have been around when it was the trailers, the road trains were built up with dollies. That's about all I can tell you at the moment, and as I say, it's nothing like the kits that I'm used to, the military kits, where you've got some of them over 1,000 pieces. It's the kits are 1/35 scale, 1/35, so you get tiny little pieces as well. This is a 1/24. It's not a huge amount bigger, but it makes a difference, and on the style that you use to make it, because the parts just aren't that small, they're a lot bigger. This is all going to be painted black, and that'll be a gloss black all the way along. The engine, apparently from the research that I've come along, it's a Cummins, and they call it a big cam, a Cummins big cam. I'll find out the rating for it, the horsepower, but I suspect it's a 460, but I could be wrong. That looks like an Eaton Fuller's gearbox to me, and if any of you have driven a Fuller's gearbox, you know the problems with it. And that's about, it's turbo blown, obviously. It has 2 exhaust stacks. I'm not really sure why. It's only got 1 exhaust pipe, but you know, they do things like that. And that's about that. That oil cooler at the back stands a huge chance of getting knocked off, doesn't it? But then again, it's about the same level as the sump, so maybe it isn't. And that's about it. That's all I can tell you. I'll get on with that. As I say, paint the engine red and then detail it out. Paint the axles red. At first I thought they were Rubery axles, Rubery Owen Rockwell axles, but I think, and I'm really going off memory here, that they're Eaton axles. If anybody knows better, please let me know. I'm sure somebody will. And that's about all I can tell you about it at the moment. Any questions? Oh, one thing I'd say is a load of pictures at the end of the video to show you how I put things together. Any questions, any comments, good or bad, please leave them in the area below. It would be great if you could like, subscribe, and if you would, share the video. And I'll see you next time. Ta-da!